Have you ever looked around the room and realized that you're the only one on your team who remembers what life was like before Wi-Fi? Your newest hire wants to change absolutely everything by next week. Your most experienced team member still has a landline and thinks that the internet's a fad. And you're stuck trying to keep the wheels turning while everybody else is speaking a different language. This isn't about age, it's about friction. Deep, cultural, value level friction. Boomers, they want FaceTime and not the type that Apple provides. Gen Z, they want flexibility. Millennials, they want purpose. Generation X, they want autonomy. And somewhere in the middle, you're trying to run a mission without alienating half of your team. Here's the truth. If you lead every generation in the same exact way, you're going to lose them all in different ways. But if you can bridge that gap, you're going to unlock a type of momentum that most leaders will never experience. Cross-generational leadership isn't a trend. It's your next real test. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Everyday Diplomat, where we talk about how real leaders build trust, lead with clarity, and solve problems without relying on rank or authority. I'm Michael Forrest, retired Marine Sergeant Major, former U.S. diplomat, and someone who spent more than 20 years leading high-performing teams through crisis, conflict, and constant change. I've stepped into commands where morale was absolutely in the gutter, where trust was all but gone, and where creativity had completely flatlined. And I didn't have time to win people over. I had to lead in a way that brought people back to the table and fast, not by barking orders louder and not by handing out motivational posters, but by building an environment where ideas could once again breathe. That's what we do here. This channel isn't about theory. It's about how to lead when the pressure is absolutely real, the culture is strained, and you can't afford to get it wrong. So if you've ever looked around and thought, my team is capable of much more, but something feels stuck, you're in the right place. Let's go ahead and call it what it is. You're not leading a team. You're leading a living, breathing timeline. For the first time in history, we have 5 generations sharing the same workplace. Baby boomers, Generation X, Millennials, Gen Z, and the often overlooked Xennials that are stuck right there in the middle. At first, this setup sounds like a storyboard for a horrible daytime television episode, and then you realize that this is a leadership goldmine. Diverse perspectives, life experience, digital fluency, strategic wisdom. But if handled poorly, it feels like trying to run a group project with 5 different people using 5 different operating systems. They don't just work differently, they think differently. They communicate in completely different forms, and they define success in a completely different manner. Boomers, they may value loyalty, hierarchy, and decades of steady contribution, while millennials want purpose feedback and room to grow. Gen Z wants speed, clarity, and a sense that their voice matters, and they want it right now. And Gen X, they're often just trying to get through the day without being pulled into all the drama. If you don't understand these expectations, if you're not aware of how different generations interpret tone, authority, structure, and even time, you're not going to just miss the mark. You're going to erode trust without even realizing it. Here's a simple example. You ask your team to brainstorm ideas for a new project that you're working on. Your Gen Z teammate fires off a voice memo at 9 p.m. with 5 bold suggestions. Your Boomer teammate wants to schedule a formal meeting to discuss this next Thursday. You didn't ask for either of them, but if you go ahead and dismiss one or the other, they both walk away thinking that they don't understand me. Multiply that moment by every interaction across your week, and now you've got a silent war happening under the surface. The younger employees begin to pull back. The older ones are going to dig in, and you're left wondering why nobody is really collaborating. This is why cross-generational leadership is hard. Not because anybody is difficult, but because the rules keep on shifting and nobody's explaining the new playbook. So if you felt that tension before, like your team should be clicking, but it keeps on stalling, you're not alone. You just keep on leading in the era of generational complexity. And now we're going to talk about what to do about it. Most leaders don't fail because they're unwilling to lead. They fail because they're using the tools that don't fit the room anymore. They're trying to motivate a Gen Z team with boomer language, or they try to relate to millennials by copying their communication style, and it comes off awkward and completely forced. Or worse, they just stick to what they know and then just assume that everybody else is going to fall in line. Here's the trap. They confuse relatability with relevance, and they confuse authority with impact. They start every single sentence with things like, back in my day, or they just don't want to work, or this generation this, or this generation that. But Those aren't leadership tools. They're just excuses for not adapting. You don't need to be trendy. You just need to be trustworthy. You don't need to understand every single TikTok trend out there. You just need to understand what motivates your people and then what disconnects them. And this is the part that really matters. You can't just lead the way that you were led, because the chances are that you came up in a system where respect was automatic, where roles were fixed, and loyalty was rewarded by time served. That's just not today's landscape. Today, trust is earned faster, but it's lost even faster. Feedback is expected early and continuously, not just annually. And people are going to follow strong leadership, but not without a reason that they can actually see. Here's what most leaders get wrong. They try to manage generations like performance problems instead of learning to lead them like people shaped by different timelines. When somebody doesn't meet expectations, you begin to think that they don't care, or they're soft, or they just don't get it. But what if the real issue isn't laziness or entitlement? What if it's mismatched expectations about how leadership is actually supposed to work? That's your real job as a leader, to align those expectations, to tune the instrument, so to say, to bring the clarity where everybody is operating in the fog. Not by lowering your standards, not by a long shot, but by raising your level of intentionality. Because if you can lead across generations with clarity and conviction, you're going to stop managing conflict and you're going to start unlocking capacity. If you're facing any of this right now and you want a step-by-step plan to lead with clarity, trust, and real-world results, my Foundations course is open now for enrollment, and it's packed with everything that I wish that I had when I first stepped into a senior leadership position. And for a limited time, there's a $100 off launch offer to celebrate the course's release. You'll see the coupon code on the screen right about here. And I also posted the link down in the description for those of you who missed it. So how do you actually lead a team that spans multiple decades? Here's the strategy that I've used to lead across generations, whether I was in a combat zone, a diplomatic post, or civilian boardrooms. Lead with curiosity, not assumptions. Most leaders walk into a room with a preconceived loaded narrative that Generation Z is soft, or Millennials, they're always entitled, or Boomers, they're incredibly stubborn and they don't ever want to change. And here's the problem with that. Once that belief is in your head, you're going to start seeing evidence of that absolutely everywhere. It's called confirmation bias, and it absolutely kills trust before it ever has a chance to form. Curiosity is the antidote. Go ahead and start by asking, what's motivating this person? And what are they responding to? What is it that they're afraid of? Go ahead and drop the labels. Watch their behavior. That's how you lead the person and not the stereotype. Second, bridge. Don't pick sides. Cross-generational leadership is not about managing up or leading down. It's about finding alignment. And alignment does not happen when you favor one group over another. It happens when you find a way to connect them to one common purpose. Here's how you can do it. Go ahead and acknowledge their differences in perspective. Define what shared goals look like in plain language, and let each generation's strengths become the solution to somebody else's weakness. You're not there to be a referee. You're there to be the interpreter. Third, go ahead and build reverse mentorship loops. This one's amazing. If you want to build mutual respect across age gaps, and I mean fast, go ahead and create structured opportunities for them to learn from each other. Try pairing your young Gen Z employee who's fluent in all things AI, AR, automation, or brand new comms tech with someone from Generation X who's maybe your well-established logistics chief, who knows how to navigate the mission, the bureaucracy, and all the real-world bottlenecks that you find. You're going to be amazed what happens when both sides realize that I'm not here to compete with you, I'm here to contribute. This isn't about who's smarter, it's about you leveraging the two types of intelligence, the tech fluency and the institutional wisdom, and finding a way to do it at the same time. Fourth, clarify the mission and flex the method. This is one of the biggest unlocks in cross-generational leadership. Boomers and Generation X, they typically want clear expectations, a structured plan, and minimal micromanagement. While Millennials and Gen Z, they tend to want room to iterate and real-time feedback. Also, a clear sense of why this actually matters, not just because they were told to. Your job as a leader is don't change the mission, but change how you let them execute it. You set the standard, they choose the approach within those boundaries that you have set. That flexibility is going to earn trust without sacrificing accountability. And fifth, celebrate contribution, not conformity. This one really matters. If you only reward people for doing things the way that you would have done them, you're going to crush innovation and make every generational divide even worse. Instead, find a way to celebrate smart risk taking. Spotlight those people who solve problems, not just follow the script, and let them see that who they are is actually valued, not just how closely they mimic leadership from more than 20 years ago. This is how you create buy-in across the board. People are going to see that what they bring to the table actually matters, not just their obedience, but their actual insight. The bottom line here, cross-generational leadership is not about fixing people. It's about you understanding how they actually work so you can lead them really well. You don't need to change your core values, and I'm going to suggest that you don't. You need to make sure, though, that those values can be heard, received, and lived out across different generational frequencies. And when you get this right, here's what's going to happen. Trust is going to accelerate, collaboration is going to sharpen, turnover is going to drop, and the team that you thought was disconnected is going to start performing at a level that no single generation could have achieved alone. If anything that we're talking about here feels like it's hitting home with you, please do us the absolute honor of hitting that like and subscribe button. It helps us tickle that YouTube algorithm so that more leaders just like you will find this type of content. We publish weekly long-form videos just like this one here on YouTube, as well as multiple shorts to keep you sharp between uploads. Let me go ahead and tell you a story that brings all of this full circle. In 2007, I was a young sergeant serving at the US Embassy in Moscow, Russia, and one of the commanders that I worked for, who played a huge role in shaping my future during that tour, was Master Sergeant Charles Rudisell. He didn't just lead with authority, he led with presence. He saw people, and he invested time. And even when the pace was brutal and the stakes were high, he made it absolutely clear that leadership is a long game. You plant seeds now that you may never see grow. Fast forward more than a decade later to 2018. I was a newly promoted first sergeant, and I had been asked to take over a new unit in San Jose, California. And when I got there, I found out that one of the Marines who were assigned to me was his daughter. Let that sink in for a moment. The last time that I saw her, she was maybe 7 years old, and she was running around with her family at our Marine house. Now, she was a United States Marine in her own right, and she was my responsibility. That moment hit me harder than any award or ceremony ever could, because it reminded me that legacy leadership is real. When Master Sergeant Rudisell invested in me back in Moscow, he had no idea that his daughter's future leader would be standing right in front of him, but he led me anyway. He built me up anyway. And that investment that he made came full circle, more than a decade later, in a way that none of us could have ever predicted. That's what generational leadership is all about. It's not about proving that you're still relevant. It's about making sure that what you pass forward is still resilient. It's about recognizing the people that you lead today may end up shaping the people that you'll never meet. You don't always see the return, but that ripple effect, it's completely real. And if you do it right, your impact doesn't end when you retire. It multiplies. If you want something that you can use right now, go ahead and download my free leadership guide, 10 Steps to Confidently Leading High-Performing Teams. It is completely free, and the link is waiting for you in the description to this video. The final truth here is that you don't get to choose the generation that you lead, but you do get to choose how you show up for them. And if you lead with consistency, integrity, and respect, I promise you they're going to meet you there. Not because you tried to be one of them, but because you proved that you were there for them. That's the difference between forced leadership and earned influence, because when you lead across generations with clarity, you stop managing misunderstandings and you start unlocking actual potential. And the real legacy, it doesn't show up in your resume. It shows up years later when somebody that you once led is now leading somebody else, using the examples that you gave them. So if you're in that place right now, in charge of a team that spans multiple decades, don't retreat from it. Enjoy it. Lean in, lead forward, and make sure that what you're building today is strong enough to be passed forward onto tomorrow. That's everyday diplomacy.